this chair though, when we're doing that kind of work, we call the chair the auxiliary chair. And Moreno termed that the auxiliary chair. It's been known as the empty chair.
Yes.
He demonstrated that back in the 30s and the 40s, and a person called Fritz Perls was in the audience, came to many of the sessions, liked and got inspired by the idea of the empty chair, the auxiliary chair.
Yeah.
Went home to Big Sur in California and created the Gestalt method, the hot seat. Never referenced Moreno. And that was a big thing with people. They wouldn't reference him. And yet psychodrama has permeated all the...
Yes.
Through
all
education,
the role training, all role plays, entire sociometry, and there's so much of applications. It's mind-boggling.
And I read once the Moreno problem. This person said the Moreno problem is that he's who invented everything. So nobody can invent anything because he's already invented it. So they call that the Moreno problem. But, you know, with tongue-in-cheek.
Yes.
But anyway, getting back to the embodiment, yes, it's very powerful when someone is chosen to be a particular person. One thing is, there you've got your audience. You've chosen an auxiliary from the audience to be your mum, let's say, with our example. You don't know why you've chosen that person. You might stop and think, oh, it's the same colour hair, or we don't know, or suddenly I'm just looking at someone, oh, you're my mum, and then everything proceeds like that.
Yes.
And then we hear in the sharing later that the mum, who was chosen for the role of the mum, has got the same mum and is having the same problems with her mum.
Yes.
Why is that so? You see, we call that telling. There's something that a person is, a feeling that's flowing out from all of us.
Yes. So
telling is operating all the time in the world.
So even all the auxiliaries are healing and benefiting out of being an auxiliary in someone else's drama. So it's like, it just works all the way around.
Yes, so it's a very economic method.
Yes.
You work with one protagonist in a group of 50 people, the whole 50 people are affected. Where else would you see that? Oh, in the theatre.
Yeah.
Millions of people. Or a rock concert. Millions of people.
Every single one of them getting affected.
Touched. You know, and they get their lights or their cameras with the light, and they move it like that. It can be very moving.
Yes.
Can't it? Everybody's affected.
Yeah.
Which comes back to the Greek sense of the catharsis. They had, you know, the amphitheatre.
Yes.
The protagonist, the antagonist, and they enacted the woes of the day, the things that were bothering the villagers. And as they enacted these themes, and then they had a chorus, which we call now the audience, but they had a chorus of people that would stand up there and go, oh woe, and they'd all chant oh woe together, which was very cathartic for the protagonist, but for the whole audience. And the whole village would then be transformed and freed up from these fears.
Yes. It's a very socially healing technique also.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, like when we do a social drama, the entire group of people healed.
Yeah.
Like how yesterday we were looking at women in India, and you know what are, as women, what are the don'ts and you know don't. So when all of us were in those different places, it was a social drama, but it's like all of us were together getting something out of that.
Exactly.
And was this word auxiliary, does this auxiliary as a word also come from the Greek theatre, or how did...
Not that I know of. I would probably say no. And I really don't know, except that I've heard Zerka talk about it from the viewpoint of an auxiliary. You know, you have in my country and in other countries too, I think, something used to be called the ladies' auxiliary. And the ladies' auxiliary were women who did things in the community. And the Country Women's Association, for example, made cakes. And they would have fetes.
Yes. Yeah.
And they would have competitions who baked the best cake. You know, so they were the ladies' auxiliaries. But also in the war, the ladies' auxiliaries were people who drove the cars, because the men were all away at war. The women drove the trucks. Queen Elizabeth herself was a truck driver in World War II with her. And she had, you know, all pants on and, you know, cap on, and she was just one of the others. So it comes from various places, I think, the word auxiliary.
Yeah.
But Moreno said about auxiliaries, you only need them for as long as you can't tie your shoelaces. So what he was meaning was, when we're little, we have our mothers tie our shoelaces. This is before Velcro. And tie your shoelace. But then, after you tie your shoelace, you don't need your mother to tie your shoelace anymore.
Yeah.
So that's a job she should stop.
Yes.
Because you can now do it. Now, we've got to be very careful then in the drama that auxiliaries don't keep going and going and going.
Yes.
Because as you have the drama, as the drama progresses, what happens is roles change.
Yes.
And healing is starting to happen. People are starting to see things differently, feel things differently. So if the auxiliaries don't shift their role,
yes,
or keep
butting in,
they can take over the drama, and there's not a trust in the process, which is that the answer, the healing, is inside each of us. And Moreno said there's a creative genius in all of us.
Yeah.
In our clients, it's not us that heals them. They heal themselves.
Yes.
And that's a very important thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the auxiliary also has to be very tuned into what the progression of the drama and where the protagonist is and where the whole drama is at different points of time.
Yeah. And it's a role training activity for an auxiliary. But let's say you're a quiet person in general and talk quietly. You're chosen by an very outgoing protagonist who has a loud voice, like this, say. And you get up and you talk like this. And you take the role and you talk like this. No. You haven't taken on the role.
Yes.
So it's very hard sometimes for someone to come up and I have to say, talk louder. Oh, but I can't. Yes, you can. Oh, I don't swear. Well, you don't have to exactly say the same swear word they said, but you could, you know, make a kind of an insult up of some kind. Now, if they can't, you have to say, look, this is just too much of a stretch for you. So you go and sit down and we'll get her to choose another auxiliary. Now that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is, okay, you stay here, you're obviously important, she's chosen you for this particular role, but I'm going to get somebody to be the voice, the loud voice. And so you're going to have two auxiliaries now. So you see the creative way you can work with it and not hurt people or dismiss them.
Yeah.
And this is really important, how you dismiss an auxiliary from the stage.
Yes.
You know, I've been dismissed from a stage because I had 3 misdemeanors. One was putting my hands in my pocket. One was standing between a husband and wife, and the light was shining on me. So I looked like the major person on the stage, on an actual stage. And I forget, I think, what the other thing was I did. But anyway, there were 3. And then I was told to get off. In no uncertain terms. Let me tell you, that was most upsetting. But I'll tell you, I've never put my hands in my pocket since. I've never stood between 2 people while they're in the middle of an enactment. I've always stood to the side, and they're very important things from a production viewpoint.